Before this story goes any further, if you're drawn to the moments history tried to bury, the cases that make officials uncomfortable, and the truths hidden behind locked doors, hit subscribe, leave a comment, and stay with me. Because what happened in Cellblock D was never meant to be understood. The sirens were already screaming when the first armored vans tore through the outer gates. Floodlights cut through the night, turning razor wire into glowing halos. Smoke drifted from inside the prison yard, thick enough to swallow the sound of shouting men. At 2:14 a.m., the warden's radio crackled with a sentence no one had ever spoken aloud before. Cellblock D is silent. Not quiet. Not secured. Silent. Inside that concrete wing, 33 men were dead or would be before sunrise, and no one could explain how a maximum security cell block, under constant watch, had gone dark without a single alarm triggering in time. By dawn, the official story would already be forming, but the truth began hours earlier. Cellblock D was the oldest structure in the prison, a blunt rectangle of poured concrete built in an era when punishment mattered more than safety. The lights flickered even on good days. The locks jammed. Cameras covered the main corridor, but blind spots festered behind thick pillars and aging steel doors. Guards hated working there. Inmates feared being transferred there. It was where trouble went to be forgotten. At 9:37 p.m., Officer Daniel Mercer signed into duty and walked the length of the corridor for the first count. Mercer had been on the job 11 years, long enough to know when a place felt wrong. That night, the noise was off. No shouting, no metal clanging, no taunts echoing through the bars. Too calm. He paused outside cell 47, where Marcus Hale usually rattled his door at count time. Hale didn't move. He sat on his bunk, staring at the wall. "You good?" Mercer asked. Hale turned his head slowly. "Just tired," he said. The words felt rehearsed. Mercer logged the count anyway. Procedure over instinct. That decision would follow him for the rest of his life. The first emergency call came from the infirmary at 10:58 p.m. An inmate collapsed during recreation, showing signs of extreme distress. Doctors worked fast. Security sealed the wing. The cause was listed as unknown. Less than an hour later, another call, then another. By midnight, the prison was operating under partial lockdown. Administrators blamed a contaminated food tray, maybe a bad batch from the kitchen. But the kitchen logs didn't match. The trays came from different lines, prepared by different inmates, at different times. The pattern didn't fit. And then the cameras in Cellblock D went black. Not one by one. All at once. The control room blamed a surge. Maintenance was called. Paperwork was started. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. Inside Cellblock D, no calls came in at all. Detective Keane arrived just after 3 a.m. Her coat pulled tight against the cold. She'd spent the last 6 years investigating institutional deaths hospitals, shelters, detention centers. Places where silence was policy and paperwork mattered more than people. She knew this feeling. The warden met her at the gate, eyes red, voice controlled. "We don't know what happened," he said. "We lost communication. When response teams entered, it was already over." Keane didn't reply. She followed the yellow tape into the corridor, stepping carefully between discarded radios and dropped batons. The air smelled stale, like metal and disinfectant. Body bags lined the wall. 33 of them. No signs of a riot. No overturned carts. No shattered fixtures. The cells were intact, locked, orderly. It looked like the aftermath of nothing at all. That was what frightened her most. Keane began with the logs, camera outages, guard rotations, meal deliveries. Everything told the same story. Normal operations until they weren't. She interviewed Officer Mercer at sunrise. "I walked the block," he said, hands shaking. "They were alive, talking, sitting up. Anyone acting strange? Keane asked. Mercer hesitated. Quiet. Too quiet. Did anyone threaten you? No. Did anyone ask for help? No. The absence of warning became its own clue. Next, Keane spoke to the survivors the inmates transferred out hours before the lockdown for work details, medical visits, or disciplinary hearings. They told different versions of the same thing. Something had changed. There were meetings, one inmate said. Not loud ones, quiet ones. Between who? Keane asked. He shrugged. People who don't usually talk. Another inmate mentioned notes being passed through vents. A third spoke of a guard who lingered too long during night rounds, listening instead of watching. Keane wrote everything down. Patterns emerge when lies overlap. By mid-morning, pressure arrived from above. State officials demanded answers. Media helicopters hovered outside the perimeter. A statement was drafted, revised, softened. Preliminary findings suggest a medical incident. The spokesperson read. No evidence of foul play at this time. Keane stared at the words. 33 men don't die quietly from coincidence. She requested access to the maintenance tunnels beneath CellblockD service corridors that hadn't been used regularly in decades. The warden denied it at first, then approved it with conditions. 2 guards, limited time. The tunnels were narrow and damp, their walls etched with decades of neglect. Keane's flashlight beam caught something on the floor near a sealed access hatch. A bundle of folded paper. She picked it up carefully. The ink had smudged, but the message was clear enough. Lights out, locks hold, silence wins. It wasn't a threat. It was a plan. Keane looked up at the sealed hatch over, realizing for the first time that whatever happened in CellblockD hadn't been chaotic. It had been coordinated. And the people responsible were still inside the prison or already protected by it. When she returned to the surface, the warden was waiting. His face tightened when he saw the paper in her hand. That area isn't part of the investigation, he said quickly. Keane met his eyes. It is now. Behind them, CellblockD stood unchanged rows of locked doors, lights flickering back to life, cameras humming as if nothing had happened. But the silence had been broken, and someone was afraid of what it might say next. Because when investigators reopened the final sealed cell at the end of the block, they found evidence that suggested the dead were never the real targets. And that was when the case truly became dangerous. By noon, CellblockD was officially reopened for structural assessment. But the truth was simpler. The state wanted the evidence boxed, labeled, and buried before questions grew teeth. Detective Laura Keane stood behind a glass partition overlooking the block, watching technicians move like ghosts through the corridor. Every door was open now, every light on, yet the place still felt sealed like a tomb pretending to be a hallway. 33 men were dead, and not one of them had screamed loud enough to be heard. Keane replayed the timeline in her head. Camera blackout at 10:11 p.m. First medical collapse at 10:58. Complete silence by 2:14 a.m. The deaths didn't happen all at once. They cascaded cell by cell, like dominoes falling in the dark. That meant time. And time meant choice. The autopsy reports arrived late in the afternoon, stamped urgent but stripped of detail. Cause of death: respiratory failure. Contributing factors: unknown chemical exposure. No defensive wounds. No signs of struggle. Keane flipped through the pages, irritation tightening her jaw. What chemical? She asked the medical examiner over the phone. There was a pause. Too long. We're still waiting on lab confirmation, he said carefully, but unofficially. It looks like something airborne. Colorless. Odorless. Where would inmates get something like that? Keane pressed. Another pause. That's not my department. It never was. She shifted her focus to the guards. Night shift rosters showed something odd. 3 officers reassigned to Cellblock D for that night only. Temporary coverage. All 3 had spotless records. All 3 had transferred in from other facilities within the last 6 months. One name stood out. Officer Raymond Ives. Ives had been on duty during the camera blackout and logged no irregularities. He also happened to be the last person to run a maintenance check on the ventilation system that fed CellblockD. Keane requested his interview file. It was already flagged restricted. She tracked down Officer Daniel Mercer again, this time off-site, sitting in his car outside a diner he hadn't gone into. They told me to keep my head down, Mercer said, eyes fixed on the steering wheel. Said the investigation was out of my hands now. Did they say why? Keane asked. Mercer shook his head. But they took my logbook. Keane's pulse quickened. Your personal one? Yeah, the one I keep notes in. Stuff that doesn't make it into official reports. Like what? Mercer swallowed. Like the smell. Keane leaned forward. What smell? Right after count, he said. Before the cameras went out. It was faint, but it wasn't normal. Not sewage, not cleaning chemicals. Sweet, almost. Sweet. Keane had heard that word before from survivors describing the air just before they felt dizzy, before men started collapsing in their cells. She thanked Mercer and told him to leave town for a few days. He didn't ask why. He already knew. That night, Keane stayed late, cross-referencing ventilation schematics with guard movement logs. Cellblock D's airflow was controlled manually from an old mechanical room beneath the west wing, accessible only with a physical key. At 9:52 p.m., Officer Ives's badge registered near that room. At 10:11 p.m., the cameras went dark. At 10:15, airflow increased by 30%. Keane printed the data and slid it into her bag. She didn't trust the building anymore, or the people in it. As she walked toward the exit, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Stop digging, the message read. You're not immune. She looked up instinctively, scanning the parking lot. Empty. Quiet. Too quiet. The next morning, the narrative shifted. A press conference announced preliminary findings suggesting a tragedy, malfunction in the prison's aging infrastructure. The governor expressed condolences. The warden emphasized cooperation. The words accountability and responsibility were carefully avoided. Keane watched from the back of the room. No questions were taken. Afterward, a senior official pulled her aside. This case is being reassigned, he said. Federal oversight. When? Keane asked. Immediately. She smiled tightly. Then why are you telling me? His voice dropped. Because you should know when to walk away. She didn't respond. Instead, she went underground literally. Using an old access map she'd copied, Keane returned to the maintenance tunnels after midnight, alone this time. The air was damp and cold. Her flashlight beam cut through the dark until it landed on the ventilation control panel. The lock had been replaced. New, clean, out of place. She photographed it, then noticed something else scratched into the concrete wall nearby. Faded, almost erased. 3 letters, D33. She froze. 33 dead. Cellblock D. This wasn't just an operation. It was a message. Footsteps echoed behind her. Keane killed the light and pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering. The steps slowed. Stopped. A voice drifted through the darkness. Calm. Familiar. You're not supposed to be here. It was Officer Ives. She stepped into the light. Neither were you that night. He didn't flinch. You don't understand what that place was. Then explain it, Keane said. Explain how 33 men died without a fight. Ives' eyes hardened. Because they were meant to. The words landed like a blow. They weren't targets, he continued. They were leverage. Against who? Keane asked. He laughed softly. That's the part you won't get to write in your report. Behind him, another figure emerged from the tunnel shadows. Then another. Keane realized too late that Cellblock D hadn't been silenced to hide a crime. It had been silenced to erase witnesses. And somewhere above them, someone powerful was counting on the truth, never making it back to daylight. Because the next name on the list wasn't an inmate. It was hers. Detective Laura Keane didn't run. That surprised even her. The tunnel felt smaller now, the walls pressing in as Officer Raymond Ives and the two men behind him closed the distance. Their boots scraped against concrete, slow and deliberate, the sound of people who knew there was nowhere to flee. You should have stayed upstairs, Ives said. This ends badly for people who ask the wrong questions. Keane raised her hand slightly, not in surrender, but to buy time. 33 men, she said. You don't erase that many lives without someone noticing. Ives tilted his head. They noticed. They just agreed not to see. One of the men behind him reached for the radio clipped to his belt. Keane acted before he could speak. She stepped back then forward, swinging her flashlight hard into Ives's wrist. The radio clattered to the floor. The tunnel exploded into motion. Keane ran. She burst out of the maintenance corridor into the West Wing stairwell, lungs burning, footsteps pounding behind her. Alarms stayed silent. No response teams. No lockdown. They'd already decided how this would go. She took the stairs 2 at a time, shoving through a fire door into the administrative level. Offices were dark, desks abandoned. Somewhere in the building, a phone rang and went unanswered. Keane ducked into records, slammed the door, and barricaded it with a filing cabinet. Her hands shook as she pulled the folded documents from her bag. The airflow logs, the badge scans, the photos of the replaced lock. Evidence that could end careers. Evidence that could end her. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. You were warned. The handle rattled. Keane sent the files. All of them. To a reporter she trusted. To a federal contact who owed her a favor. To a cloud server with a timed release. Then she hid the phone in a drawer and waited. The door gave way with a crack of split, tearing wood. Ives stepped inside first, breathing hard, eyes cold. You don't get it, he said. This wasn't about punishment. It was about containment. Keane stood her ground. Containment of what? He hesitated, just long enough to tell her she was close. Cellblock D housed informants, he said finally. Men who knew things. About guards. About contractors. About shipments that never showed up on manifests. Drugs? Keane asked. He shook his head. Worse. People. The words settled heavy between them. Transfers, Ives continued. Inmates moved off the books. Released early. Disappeared. Cellblock D was the choke point. The only place everyone passed through. And the 33? Keane asked. Collateral, he said flatly. The message was the silence. Keane felt the anger rise, sharp and dangerous. You murdered them to protect a pipeline. To protect an institution, Ives corrected. You think anyone up there wants to admit they lost control? That they traded human lives for order? Behind him, one of the men raised his weapon. Sirens wailed. Real ones this time. Ives' eyes flicked toward the sound, calculation breaking through the certainty. The building shook as armored vehicles pulled into the yard. Keane smiled, just a little. Guess someone noticed. The arrests were quiet. No perp walks, no press conference. Ives and the others were escorted out through a side exit before dawn, faces covered, names withheld. Official statements came later. Ongoing investigation. No further comment. Isolated misconduct. The reporter ran the story anyway. So did 3 others. The public learned about the ventilation override, the camera blackout, the missing logs, the notes in the tunnels. They learned that 33 men died not in a riot, not from a malfunction, but because silence was useful. Families demanded answers. Lawsuits follow. ED committees were formed. A warden resigned for personal reasons. A contractor vanished overseas. For a moment, it felt like justice might actually happen. 3 weeks later, Keane stood outside a federal building watching snow gather on the steps. Her badge was clipped to her coat, newly issued. Temporary assignment, they said. Oversight. She knew what it really meant. Containment. Her phone buzzed. A message from Mercer. They closed Cellblock D today. Sealed it for good. She typed back. Good. Then another message came through. This one from an unknown number. No threat this time. Just coordinates. And a photo. A concrete wall. Fresh paint. 3 letters scratched into it. D33. Keane closed her eyes. They'd buried the wing, but not the system. The pipeline didn't end it rerouted. It always did. That night, she drove past the prison one last time. The lights were on. The cameras working. The official story intact. From the road, it looked calm. Controlled. Silent. Keane pulled over, staring at the walls that had swallowed 33 lives without a sound. The truth had escaped, but only barely. And as she drove away, one thought stayed with her, heavy and unresolved. They caught the men who flipped the switches, but the people who ordered the silence were still very much awake. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one.